I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. It is a big news day. We're heading right down to the University of Virginia. We've got Jennifer Lawless. She's the chair of the political science department down there, and we are glad to have her. Professor, thanks so much.
Of course.
Okay, let's jump into it. Big news, Joe Biden, Quinnipiac, he's got to love that school, comes out with a poll showing him beating Donald Trump in the presidential election. It's probably the first time in a significant poll that shows Biden winning.
Right. And the important thing is he's winning outside the margin of error. So this is the first poll where even if he was a little bit ahead, it's not a statistical tie. And it's obviously news that the Biden campaign is happy about. The only downside to the poll is it also shows Nikki Haley beating Joe Biden outside the margin of error. So, this is good news, assuming that Donald Trump is the nominee, and there's no reason to think he won't be. But it does highlight that his support is not necessarily, as widespread as the campaign would like.
Yeah, let's break this down a little bit. Against Donald Trump, let's start there, and then we'll go to Nikki Haley. Against Donald Trump, he is beating Donald Trump with women by a significant margin. Talk about that, and as this sort of messaging on the issue of abortion been what's driving that differentiation?
Well, there's been a gender gap in presidential politics in every election since 1980, where Democrats are more likely to vote for the Democratic candidate. And in particular, because women are more likely to be Democrats, they're more likely to support the Democratic candidate than they are the Republican. So it's not unusual. What is important for the Biden campaign is being able to maintain that level of support, because if he can bank on women, and suburban women in particular, who are motivated by the choice issue to come out to vote, he can deal with little bits of losses among other demographic groups where he might not be performing as well as he has in the past. So the general pattern is not unusual. The key for the Biden campaign is going to be to maintain that gender gap.
Now, as silly as running Joe Biden for president, for the Democrats, running Donald Trump might be as silly for the Republicans. Nikki Haley is repeatedly beating Joe Biden by significant margins in a head-to-head contest. Talk about that margin, and if she ever sneaked through, it's a nightmare scenario for Joe Biden.
I'd say a few things. The first is that if the election were held today, there's a good chance that she would beat him in the popular vote. That said, the Biden campaign has not been campaigning against Nikki Haley at all. And so everything that voters have heard about her and everything they know about her has come from the primary. And in the primary, in the GOP primary, she's been painted and portrayed as pretty moderate, as, more mainstream. And the reality is she's not. She's ultra conservative too. And so at this point, I think there are a lot of independents and even some disaffected Democrats who feel like she wouldn't be a terrible option. In a general election, when the Biden campaign would actually go against her, those numbers would change pretty substantially. And I wouldn't be surprised if they'd wind up looking a lot more like the Biden-Trump head-to-head than what they currently do.
And did you get that right from the White House? Did they send that directly to you? Is that the
Through
flip
an IV.
messaging? Carrier pigeon, how did they send it?
I can't even, I'm not engaging.
Let's talk Taylor Swift. You think you've heard it all, and if you go back to sort of politics of the 19th century, they were pretty hardcore American presidential politics, talking about children out of wedlock and things like this. But the term "jump the shark" doesn't even apply. There is a significant belief among certain members of the Trump MAGA movement that believes, walk me through it, because I'm not sure I completely understand the scenario.
It's pretty crazy. I have to say, a Washington Post reporter called me about this yesterday, and I was somewhat stunned that we're actually having a national conversation regarding this. So the theory out there is that because Taylor Swift is a global icon, because she has a following like no other celebrity has, the fact that she's going to these NFL games to support her boyfriend is really based on the Biden campaign encouraging her to go out there and then ultimately endorse Biden on this national stage, so that all of these football fans who ordinarily might not vote for Biden will vote for Biden. And, this is the Republicans' attempt to argue that the Democrats are injecting presidential politics and partisanship into football. The whole thing is completely ridiculous for several reasons. The first is she hasn't actually endorsed Joe Biden. The second is, if she does endorse Joe Biden, it doesn't matter where she is when she actually issues that endorsement, it's going to reach everybody. And the third is that celebrity endorsements rarely matter. Now, if she sends out an Instagram post, or if she texts something or posts on social media in the days leading up to the election, encouraging people to get out to the vote, some of her fans might vote when they otherwise might not. But to suggest that she can fundamentally shape the presidential political playing field is completely insane. And it's also kind of ridiculous to assume that she has these nefarious motives for showing up at these games, when really all she's doing is cheering on her boyfriend. So my joke of the day is the Republicans really should just shake it off.
One of the late night comedian talk show hosts last night said that if the Swifties, Taylor Swift's followers, were the attackers on the Capitol on January 6th, in order to try and take over the government, not only would they have been victorious, they would be running the United States of America right now. Taylor Swift right now is as powerful an icon in the world as anyone. She has to have an effect. She affects moms and young women and some men, etc. And she is the most popular person in the United States right now, I believe, according to public policy polls.
So a Joe Biden endorsement, if she were to endorse Joe Biden, and she has said, for example, that she regrets not explicitly endorsing Hillary Clinton in 2016, for example, but if she were to endorse Joe Biden, there's no question that everybody would know that Taylor Swift endorsed Joe Biden. But that's only the first ingredient in being able to actually sway people's votes, right? The next is that people have to say that, oh, I like Taylor Swift so much that I'm going to follow her advice. And that assumes that they're placing her advice above all of the other ingredients that go into their decision about who they're going to vote for. So there's no question that there are a handful of people out there who might not otherwise vote. And if Taylor Swift tells them to and tells them that Joe Biden's great, they might turn out. But that's a pretty small percentage. The best analogy that I can think of is Oprah Winfrey in 2008. So this was the first time that Oprah, who was, the most popular, beloved person in the world in 2008, got involved in presidential politics, and she endorsed Barack Obama. And I will never forget listening to an NPR story where she was at a rally in South Carolina, and there were all of these women in the parking lot, and journalists were going up to the women saying, so why do you like Barack Obama? And they said, who's Barack Obama? They were there to see Oprah. They were there to listen to Oprah. So, the assumptions that are required for Taylor Swift to fundamentally change the political playing field are pretty crazy.
A series of Taylor Swift concerts for Joe Biden might have an effect.
But can't hurt. And look, and I wouldn't be surprised if she endorses him, I wouldn't be surprised if in Detroit or in Philadelphia or in Milwaukee the night before Election Day, there's a big rally and she performs, because it's in those kinds of cities where the goal is to get voter turnout through the roof, especially among young people. But again, those are people that are already likely to support Joe Biden. It's just a matter of motivating them to go to the polls.
Let's go to some bad news for Joe Biden. Robert Kennedy continues to go out there, pound away and get on ballots. Joe Manchin continues to make noise that he is going to run potentially as a no labels candidate or something else. What's the complexity of, 1 point here, 2 points there, of these semi-Democrats running and peeling off some conservative Democratic votes from Joe Biden? They wouldn't necessarily have gone to Donald Trump, but they can still protest against Joe Biden's policies and feel good about themselves in their minds.
Yeah, it's not good for the Biden campaign because they now have to work this into their overall strategy. Now, if candidates like Joe Manchin and Robert F. Kennedy are on ballots in states like New York or in states like Idaho, it doesn't matter. Right. Because those are heavily blue or heavily red states. A third party is not going to potentially be a spoiler. But if they're on the ballot in states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Colorado, Arizona, Georgia, it's a problem. And what that means is that the Biden campaign, in addition to running against Donald Trump, is going to have a parallel campaign encouraging people not to waste their vote and not to throw it away and vote for a third party candidate. Now, again, it's doable. And after the 2000 election, where a lot of people believed that Ralph Nader really acted as a spoiler and cost Al Gore the election, we've seen candidates navigate this pretty well. But in 2016, it's unclear. Did Jill Stein ultimately cost Hillary Clinton the election? She certainly didn't have as much appeal as some of these other candidates. So it becomes an additional dimension that the Biden campaign has to deal with on a daily basis and work into their overall strategy.
Donald Trump got some bad news last week when he got a judgment against him by a jury in New York for $83 million. We understand that Donald Trump has somewhere around $1 billion or more dollars. $83 million has to hurt. It has to be a distraction. And does it play into that issue of his treatment of women?
It does. So there are a couple of things. It plays into his treatment of women, but I don't know that there's anybody walking the planet right now who doesn't already know about Donald Trump's treatment of women. So I'm not sure that substantive verdict moves the needle for anybody. I don't think anybody was surprised by it. What I do think it does is contribute to Donald Trump's coming undone. So he hates losing. He hates parting with his own money. And he hates the idea that he'll be less rich on day 2 than he was on day 1. And so this verdict, more so than tapping into, his sexism and, sort of bad behavior with women, I think is the idea that it's going to make him crazy. Like if he ultimately has to pay this after the appeal, you can imagine that he's not going to be able to handle it. And, it's when he has those rants and he has those tantrums that a lot of independent voters realize that they cannot go through this again.
Could it be, though, a little bit that she came across as the storyline has developed as a little more sympathetic, a little frail, very elderly? This was not Jennifer Flowers. This was a different dynamic of bad male politician versus female victim, that it felt uglier.
So it did, but one thing I would say here is I think that the better comparison is this was not Stormy Daniels, because remember with Jennifer Flowers, that was completely consensual. Bill Clinton was having an affair, lied to his wife, and
I'm sorry, I can't. I'll mix up all the Bill Clinton and Donald Trump.
Well, I'm a scholar of presidential scandals, so don't worry about it. Especially sex scandals, love them. But so with Stormy Daniels, you have this person who looks like a porn star, and it's a totally different situation. And she also was not alleging rape. Like she was alleging bad behavior and that she was bought off. But with E. Jean Carroll, it's a crime, and it was a long time ago, and she was an incredibly compelling witness, and she's also not she's not somebody that you look at and you think is out to get him, right? So she was very sort of calm, cool, collected, and composed. So I think in a lot of ways she was the best case scenario in terms of a jury feeling like they could really provide, be empathetic toward a victim. But I also think that anybody that's in Trump's court doesn't believe her, and anybody who's not does. And so again, we've reached this point when it comes to Trump's base, nothing he says is not true for them, regardless of how far-fetched it might seem, or regardless of how far outside the lines it goes.
Last question before you go. Yesterday there was a high-profile congressional hearing on social media companies and how they have damaged families and children's, and in some cases the link has been made that their lack of controls have led to the death of some children. Members of the United States Senate, including Lindsey Graham and Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, attacked these companies. Why do they even need to go through this process? Why not just straight up pass a law, which Congress has been unwilling to do for this entire period of time, going back to David Cicilline and breaking up some of the monopolistic aspects of these social media companies? Congress does nothing to limit these companies.
because they worry that it would be unpopular, and because they, in an ideal world, would like these companies to police themselves, regardless of the fact that for
Well,
decades now,
how's
they
that
haven't
working
been.
out? I mean, at what
Absolutely.
point
I mean,
do
and,
we?
and they've reached the point now too where they have people like Mark Zuckerberg apologizing and saying these were not our intentions, and still doing nothing about it.
Correct.
So it's a great issue for people to showboat on, and at the end of the day, they're not delivering.
It is. It's been an ugly year, ugly few years for Congress. Yesterday, plus the immigration issue, are just two ugly, ugly reminders how ineffective Congress is right now. You get the last word. What should people be looking for?
Well, I think over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to get a better sense of what the Biden-Trump campaign is going to look like. The final, the final nail in the coffin for Nikki Haley will likely be South Carolina in a couple of weeks, and it's likely that the Biden campaign will be floating and trying out several of its messages between now and then, because Trump is still focused on Nikki Haley. But within the next couple of weeks, it's going to be full general election campaign mode.
Jennifer Lawless, the chair of the Political Science Department at the University of Virginia. As always, we appreciate you joining us every week. For everybody else, stay tuned. There is a lot going on. GoLocal had broke down the numbers on the campaign finance reports for the three Democrats who have voiced that they may be running for governor in 2026. We have those numbers. We've also got some insights into the chief of staff to Peter Alviti over at Rile, who is claiming he is going to run for attorney general. He's fundraising from Rile employees. We broke that down as well. Everybody stay safe, enjoy the day. We'll have much more on GoLocal throughout the day.